Okay, I guess that you can see the presentation now.
Yeah, it's okay.
Great. So, well, given the audience, I probably need to start by saying good morning, afternoon or evening, depending on where you are, as I assume that some of you are, I mean, all of you are connecting from probably different parts of the world. Well, before starting with the presentation, I have to say that it's obviously a great pleasure for me to be here, and I would like to thank Adnane for the invitation. I was really pleased for that. With this presentation, as Imane was saying, I'll be focusing on the governance of smart city transitions and in particular the challenges that cities are facing when dealing with these complex transformation processes, which are indispensable to ensure that digital and smart technologies for addressing problems that impact on urban development are correctly embedded in our built environment. This is unfortunately not an easy task, especially for public sector organizations. So the objective of my presentation is to give you a brief overview of what smart city transitions are, both in theory, but especially in practice. An idea of what development paths are available based on what we see from existing cases and available literature. And the third point, I would like also to give you some key strategic principles that should be considered, again, based on our research, in order to ensure that smart city transitions are truly sustainable. And one point that I would like to make before starting, I think it is important to precise that everything in this presentation is evidence-based and relates to a series of multidisciplinary publications and results of many research projects, which are mainly supported via European funding schemes. So, for example, 7th Framework Program, but also Horizon 2020, and consultancy activities that we have conducted or are in development with the European Commission, United Nations, and more recently also with the Development Bank of Latin America. I will try in a very compressed way to make you see some of the results of 6 years of intensive research, which attempts to build bridges between urban studies and innovation studies. And I have listed the key publications I'll be referring to in the presentation, just in case you want to dig deeper. So let's start by looking at the smart city concept, because my understanding when I do this presentation is that there is always a little bit of confusion, or at least very divergent interpretations. So available data does picture a challenging scenario. The world is far from attaining resource-efficient, safe, and universally accessible urban settlement. We know that. And more work is needed to ensure that nobody is left behind. But at the same time, what existing data also makes clear is that if correctly used, the digital technologies that are transforming cities in urban, in smart environments can help overcome existing urban sustainability challenges. And they can support a more sustainable urbanization process. But everything depends on how we use them. So smart cities are those urban environments which are accelerating sustainability transitions by assembling and continuously expanding a platform of digital solutions to urban sustainability challenges. This is how we interpret smart cities. And these digital solutions include computing technologies for addressing the social, managerial, and also the environmental problems which undermine urban planning and development practices. Smart city transitions are about connecting virtual and physical spaces by means of technology. And the result is an ICT augmented urban environment. Digital technology becomes a tool for boosting sustainability, which is what should be the expected outcome. Helping cities across the world to adopt a smart city approach to urban sustainability development is one of the main commitments of the United Nations. And this commitment is made explicit in the new urban agenda that you see in the slide, but also in a fairly new established flagship program on human-centered smart cities. So there is a strong interest even within intergovernmental organizations. It's a key priority. And in the following slides, I have included some example of digital solutions which are helping cities to meet the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations have agreed upon. The first one is called, you might even know them already. The first one is called HubCub. To facilitate the sustainable management of natural resources in New York City, we have MIT, Audi, and General Electric that decided to map an entire year of taxi trips originating and ending in Manhattan. So we are talking about true big data, 172 million trips and approximately, if I remember correctly, 14,000 vehicles. What data was collected? We have vehicle IDs, GPS coordinates of the pickup and drop-off locations, and also the travel time. This massive amount of data was used to build an interactive visualization map that groups together a whole year of taxi movements, and everything is stored online and is accessible online, so it's free. By selecting any destination and pickup addresses, if you use this platform, the HubCub map shows the collective travel partners and details the potential benefits generated by shared taxi services. And the benefits are expressed in savings for passengers, but also number of untraveled miles and quantity of carbon dioxide not emitted into the atmosphere. So again, a huge asset if used in a proper manner. Other example that I really love, WheelMap, a worldwide map for the identification of wheelchair accessible places, whose objective is to ensure equal access to basic services, which is a huge problem worldwide. This map has been designed by using, I would say, a Wikipedia approach. Users provide or can provide their local knowledge to other users in relation to allocations accessibility. So it's a genuine crowdsourcing exercise. The map currently counts more than 1 million public spaces, and overall, this platform makes it easier to understand the level of accessibility offered by a location, but it also makes private and public owners of wheelchair inaccessible public spaces aware of the issue. Other example, we have an example related to the global food supply chain, which is, as many of you may already know, one of the largest consumer of the world's land, water, and energy, and perhaps also even the most wasteful. A food cloud aims to tackle this issue. It is an online platform, food sharing platform, which helps charities and community organizations to know when surplus food is available for donation. And when partner stores have food that cannot be sold, they can upload donation request onto the platform. Immediately after a donation request is submitted, a notification is sent automatically to the local charities and community organizations that are partnering with the Food Cloud. And the notification asks them to confirm the acceptance of the food and to proceed with the collection process and the subsequent distribution. So available smart city technologies are really many. These are just a very few examples. But a question which has not been answered yet is how do we build platforms of integrated smart city solutions in a sustainable manner? In order to become smart, cities are required to design and implement a process of change, which is what we call a transition. And this transition ensures that the smart city technologies are correctly integrated into the urban environment and that they can produce the value that we're looking for, meaning an improved sustainability. And the reason why we don't have a comprehensive understanding of how sustainable smart city transitions unfold is because there are different opinions which overlap, creating a quite confusing scenario, especially for practitioners and decision makers. So when we started looking into the unfolding of smart city transitions, we found, for example, 5 main development paths of smart cities, each one carrying different strategic perspective and also conceptualizations, which are fairly different. And this obviously create confusion. So the first one that we found is the experimental path, which describes smart cities as urban testbeds for experimenting Internet of Things infrastructure components and applications. So it's very heavy on technology, and analyzing also their functioning, relevance, and also the potential impact in real life environments. The case of Santander represents a practical example of this experimental path. With more than 12,000 IoT devices, this small Spanish city has been transformed in a test facility for research and experimentation. And the objective of this transition is knowledge production. So we're talking about experimentation for supporting technological advancement, rather than public value creation in the form of an improved urban sustainability. Then we have the ubiquitous path, other example. According to this path, smart city and ubiquitous city are equivalent terms, and this is something else that creates confusion, because both terms are used for describing urban environment in which all information systems are linked together and everyone can access them everywhere and anytime, thanks to ICT devices and infrastructure. Most of the attention received by this specific path comes from the Republic of Korea, where a national program on ubiquitous cities was launched, I think it was in 2007, more or less. And this program was based on a technocentric and top-down approach to smart city transitions and was largely biased toward industrial and economic development, reflecting the interest of business providers rather than, again, public interest and benefits. There are some key examples that are coming from this path. Some cities that are quite discussed in the literature, like, for example, Songdo. The technology-led vision of smart cities that is proposed in the previous path is also the engine that fuels ICT multinational companies and their involvement in the smart city market. They carry a great deal of knowledge, all these multinational companies. The problem is that when we try to connect this knowledge with the need of public sector organizations, the situation tends to become a bit complicated because we don't talk about business to business, but we have a completely different scenario. So the smart city projects produced by these companies have led to the growth of the corporate smart city model that conceives smart cities as urban areas which are equipped with the one-size-fits-all digital solutions that such companies can offer. And this obviously doesn't fit that much with the fact that we can consider cities quite unique entities. The corporate smart city model has resulted in what researchers are describing as a new form of urbanism, whereby IT solution providers try to persuade municipalities to support urban development by adopting their smart technologies. If you have these technologies, you are smart. That's the kind of message. Then we have the European path, which emerged from the vision of the European Commission. And in this case, smart cities are those urban areas using energy efficiency technologies for transforming their buildings, energy networks, and transport systems, demonstrating transition concepts and strategies to a low carbon economy, which is the key focus. In this particular path, smart cities are pictured as highly efficient urban systems in which digital technologies are used to tackle environmental degradation and fight climate change. So strong focus on environmental degradation. And the last one that I would like to use as an example to show the problem of these divergent perspectives is the holistic path. We call this path holistic because it proposes a holistic interpretation of smart city transitions in which human, social, cultural, environmental, economic, and obviously technological aspects stand alongside one another in the field of smart city development. So with this path, smart cities are conceived as urban areas in which digital technologies are assembled to meet any local needs, any local development needs. And it highlights that their development requires collective intelligence, participatory governance, collaboration, community-led urban development, and also open and user-driven innovation. Now, as I was saying, if we compare this path in relation to some key strategic aspects of smart city development, that divergence that I was mentioning at the beginning becomes immediately visible. There are contradicting views. We see that we describe in the form of four, for example, dichotomies. In some cases, we have paths that are describing smart city development as a technology-led strategy, whereas in other cases, there is an holistic perspective in terms of the strategizing. Double helix innovation models for collaboration versus quadruple helix models, which means, for example, in the corporate path, there is a strong emphasis on the collaboration between two entities, public sector on one side and technology providers on the other. Whereas other paths like the last one or the European one, they are really stressing the fact that this is something that goes beyond this double helix collaboration, and it requires the involvement of other organizations, like, for example, civil society organizations or universities and research institutions, and also citizens. Then there is a problem with the approach. Are we talking about top-down technology that has to be included within the urban environment, or is it something that has to grow bottom-up? And the other problem is the intervention logic. For example, we saw that with the European path, there is the European Commission path, there is a strong emphasis on specific sectors, and which means mobility, energy networks, and buildings, and a strong emphasis on one single dimension of what smart city transition could be, which means the environmental sustainability aspect. Whereas in other cases, like, for example, the corporate path, the ubiquitous path, or the holistic path, there is a more integrated intervention logic in which there is a tendency to see smart city and smart city technology as something that can benefit many different sectors. So to shed some light and untangle the situation, which was and still is very complex, we decided to start conducting some case study analysis. We look at smart city transitions and examples of smart city technology adoption all over the world. We started with some European cities, then we move to North American smart city transitions, and most recently we started going even broader because we are conducting a huge global study with the United Nations and the Development Bank of Latin America, and we currently have data right now because we have just closed the first phase of the project. We have data on approximately 250 cities worldwide, so across all continents. So thanks to all this knowledge, what happened, we started looking at that in many of the cases that we analyzed, it was necessary to assemble and analyze the program of activities that cities have launched to manage their smart city transitions. This was the only way in which we could understand the process and the rationale. And the findings of our studies made it possible to define a set of initial strategic principles that we are now expanding with the project that I was mentioning before, and we'll have some initial findings probably towards the end of June. So first and most important, enabling smart city development is a challenge that goes far beyond technology. So we saw the smart city transitions result from the continuous implementation of short and medium-term ICT-related interventions that gradually transform cities into smart environments. And this transformation resembles what we see as the urban acupuncture idea that was developed by Jamie Lerner for Brasilia a few years ago. However, to let this progressive digital transition take place in different sectors, significant efforts must be oriented towards building the capacity of the city or the urban environment and its users to integrate and deploy these new technology solutions. These require cities to align technological development with the content of a holistic and comprehensive strategic framework, which is required to provide long-term sustainability and drive individuals and organizations in the same direction. It is necessary to create orchestration. And cities also need to build an open, inclusive, and engaging collaborative environment that strengthens the capacity of these individuals and organizations to work together and actively participate in the co-creation of ICT-related initiatives that bring innovation and improvement into the city. One key element that comes out from smart city development is that the transformation, like when we were discussing e-government a few years ago, is not within the boundaries of public sector organizations anymore. It is bigger. It is outside these walls. It's in the city when we have a multitude of actors that are working on many different projects that are not necessarily correlated in a specific plan. So they might overlap, they might create redundant technologies. Therefore, there is a need for coordination. When addressing urban sustainability challenges with smart city solutions, it is important to remember that technology alone cannot guarantee the realization of urban sustainability goals. To build an effective transformation path, we believe that a deep and localized understanding of the problems at hand is first required, so that technological solutions can be combined with innovations in institutional settings, funding mechanisms, governance and organizational systems, user behavior, and also business models. There are non-technological changes that tend to remain hidden because of an excessive focus on technology, but they are indispensable to trigger a place-based adaptation process in which technologies and application contexts develop together. They adapt to each other. So, for example, we saw that some African-based companies are providing solar home systems and energy services to population in the sub-Saharan region, where the number of urban and rural residents with no access to electricity is still very, very high. And these companies distribute off-grid technology, and their operations are successful because they're based on a pay-as-you-go business model. This business model reduces affordability issues and it ensures higher adoption rates. So customers pay small amounts of money every month until they reach the necessary expenditure to own their appliance. And with a high number of low-income residents, without this flexibility, without this innovative business model, the potential impact of off-grid technology in this region will be undermined. So it's not just about technology. Unfortunately, we saw that many urban settings across the world are exposing these technocentric understanding of smart city transitions, which might combine with a dangerous one-size-fits-all mentality. And this conceptualization of smart city development overlooks the importance of considering the social construction component of urban technological transformations, because digital solutions are separated from geographical scales and also time. When this happens, digital technologies for sustainable urban development are erroneously conceived as ready to implement technological upgrades, rather than ongoing socio-technical processes of change that are firmly embedded into spatial dimensions and existing socio-technical arrangements. And to enhance urban sustainability, smart city transitions require a people-centered focus, and they should be conceived as and deployed by considering local context conditions, which are essential. This is what happened in many countries when the COVID-19 pandemic forced the world to shift to remote education. That's another example. When examining the policy responses of national governments to school closures, for example, we see a great deal of strategic thinking. We see policy responses that are tailored to local needs and contextual conditions, and that take into proper account already available resources. For example, the creation of online learning platform has been an almost universal reaction in all countries, but recognizing that students do not have the same access to the technology required to engage with online education, some governments have channeled teaching activities through televisions, phones, and radios. So less advanced technology, but still a very big impact. And with public budgets affected by severe financial constraints and an austerity situation, selecting smart technology or smart solutions that can ensure value for money is another key priority. now probably more than ever, especially in the after of the pandemic. In this regard, experiences like off-grid technology in sub-Saharan regions and the policy responses to school closures are of the utmost importance. Because they show that smart city related efforts in urban contexts do not always need to be based on the application of very advanced, expensive, and highly experimental technological solutions. Urban sustainability enhancement can also be generated by means of already available, less advanced, and relatively unsophisticated applications, I would say. In relation to this point, another very nice example that I always try to bring with me is the building block program of UN Habitat. This exemplary case is an initiative that puts Minecraft in the framework of public space planning, where the popular computer game has become a participatory tool for stimulating the co-production of regeneration projects for public spaces that have been left neglected. Central to block by block is the need to make urban planning and design more inclusive by offering people without design and architectural skills an easy way to effectively communicate their ideas to professionals. The Minecraft-based methodology has been already implemented in more than 35 countries worldwide, where it has provided urban residents with virtual environments in which they can collaboratively design, build, and also discuss virtual urban landscapes and architectural models. Models that have the potential to improve the quality of existing urban spaces. And despite using a relatively unsophisticated technology, this solution has been incredibly successful, especially in triggering the active participation of residents who do not typically have a voice in public projects. In particular, we have hard-to-reach groups such as younger generations, women, slum dwellers. It has created an incredible way of generating these collaborative environments. Many other inspiring smart city initiatives like Building Block are showing results and impact over the world. And many of these good practices can be replicated and scaled up to address existing urban sustainability challenges in many urban spaces. It is just a matter of adaptation. But bringing these global expertise to scale is critical to accelerate sustainable urban development. Urban development actors encounter difficulties when attempting to benefit from this expertise. They cannot see the big picture, we saw that, of available solutions. They can only perceive a fragmented knowledge landscape, and this fragmentation limits replication, policy mobility, and cross-country synergies, which could reduce research and development costs and also eliminate duplicate efforts. More intense efforts, in our opinion, are strongly needed to pull this global expertise, tacit knowledge in particular, and to institute the knowledge transfer mechanisms which are needed to ensure that such a vast expertise and knowledge can travel widely, rather than remaining confined in specific local boundaries, hidden. Essential to fulfill this objective is the introduction of dedicated knowledge sharing platforms. Despite not being focused on smart city solutions, what you can see in this slide is what we consider as a good example, as a good practice. This is the online database that the United Nations Department of Economics and Social Affairs have recently launched to collect and share available good practices and lessons learned in the framework of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. This learning space is the result of a remarkable collective action, and it offers a valuable data-rich environment that all countries can use, and it's generated by input that all countries are providing. An open, inclusive, and engaging urban innovation environment is also essential because it is the only way in which we can sustain smart city transitions. And to build it, it is important to rely on public and private sector collaboration, The public sector cannot work alone in this context. It is important to institute the industry-government research relationships of the triple helix collaboration model, in which we have academia, industry, and government. But it's also extremely important to make significant efforts to strengthen the participatory quality of civil society, which means trying to include a user-centric innovation approach that puts citizens at the center of the discussion, especially their needs. Smart city transitions require strong collaborative environments, and we saw that everywhere, in which we have heterogeneous actors representing different institutional contexts that create an innovation process of change where values, expectations, and knowledge are shared for the benefit of all the participants. What you see in the slide, for example, is what we mapped for the city of Helsinki. But there are many other examples that are very similar. And the leadership and political support of the local government are indispensable in order to develop these transition mechanisms, but they are not sufficient. A solely top-down approach does not lead to sustainable smart city transitions. We saw that in many cases. Local governments, based on what we're seeing, should use their leadership in order to stimulate bottom-up innovation by ensuring that creativity, experimentation, and also the element of play are incorporated into the smart city development strategies. For example, in the cases we have analyzed, citizen engagement and collaboration have been stimulated through the organization of competitions, challenges, and hackathons, and I'm sure they are familiar with these events, which have been backed by robust open data policies encouraging the informed reuse of public data sets that the city governments share on their open data platforms in most of the cases. City governments should also try to outline a citywide strategic framework for smart city development, a set of policy documents which need to clearly establish, and also regulatory documents that should really establish, for example, a long-term vision in which it is necessary to understand ambitions and motivations that are triggering the transformation process, expected outcomes and targets to achieve. So why do we need technology? To what purpose? Application domains. So where is the technology most needed at a specific space, in a specific space and during a specific time? And one thing that is extremely important, it is necessary to have a working group that is responsible for managing and also accelerating the implementation of the smart city strategy. We called this working group Smart City Accelerator, a team that is tasked with accelerating the progressive transformation of the city in a smart environment by strengthening the capacity of individuals and organizations to collaborate in delivering innovative ICT-related initiatives. As I was saying, this is not just about the public sector producing new smart city projects. It's about many different actors within a city and even outside the city that are collaborating in order to develop many different projects. So there is a very decentralized approach. Without orchestration, it creates a lot of difficulties. Smart city accelerators can be part of either the city government, based on what we have seen, or other existing organizations that carry out community tasks, as in the case of Barcelona that you are seeing here, in which we have the main component is the Municipal Institute of Information Technology, and it is located within the city council. Otherwise, smart city accelerators can be created by establishing new public-private organizations which are autonomous and provided with independent legal identities, as in the case of Barcelona, where we have the Amsterdam Economic Board. One thing that remains to be seen is what solution is best and in what conditions, because we are still without the knowledge necessary to understand what would be the best strategy when selecting the type of accelerator that a city should include. And what also means to have an accelerator within a big city or a small city. There are very big differences, but at the moment, available knowledge is not shedding any clarity on this aspect. Another interesting example is the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications of New York City. Depending on the situations, this is a nice example because it shows you the flexibility of these specific entities. This department acts as a service provider for, let's say, internal development of digital services, as an advisor for externals and internals, and also as a broker in an attempt to build connections with external stakeholders and create the innovation ecosystem which is necessary to support smart city transitions. And it offers structured oversight for the diverse portfolio of technology projects serving the city of New York. Additionally, this department ensures that smart city development is approached collectively, as I was saying, and cuts across different sectors and divisions of the city government, because it is important to adopt an integrated intervention logic. The energy-driven interpretation of smart city development that we saw before, for example, with the European Commission path, sets boundaries that cities need to overcome, in our opinion. Smart city development pathways need to be shaped according to each city's socioeconomic and cultural background, and the selection of the application domains strongly depends on local context factors. Therefore, it is important to adopt an integrated intervention logic that cuts across all application domains that smart city development represents and extends the benefits that ICT solutions can offer to any policy sectors of the city. Now, based on what we have seen, I would like to share with you what I consider as some of the most important takeaway messages. So we still know very little about smart city transitions, and this is, in my opinion, quite worrying. Therefore, it is crucial for cities to not deal with this transformation process in isolation. Collaboration is truly key, and mutual learning is indispensable, because the fact that cities are acting so much, they are very active in this field. There is a lot that we can learn, and the studies that we have conducted so far are really demonstrating that. And from a research point of view, we have the responsibility to ensure that the lessons coming from the laboratory of practice are captured, formalized, and shared properly. Longitudinal case studies, for example, and large-scale comparative analyses are urgently needed, especially if they are aiming at providing a more in-depth understanding of multi-level governance, local governance, collaborative dynamics, and assessment tools in the framework of smart city transitions. But to capture this knowledge, we need more multidisciplinarity, which is another problem that we see at the research level. Smart city transitions are very complex urban transformation processes. You have seen that, and untangling this complexity requires a multidisciplinary approach that goes also towards an interdisciplinary approach. Organization studies, urban studies, innovation studies, knowledge related to sociology, political science, or governance studies, research on social network and collective behavior, computer science, and any other discipline related to engineering and technology. All these disciplines are looking into the smart city phenomenon. But what we have found is that they tend to do that with very little interaction among each other. There are lots of silos. Although difficult, we do need to try to break these silos. And smart city researchers need to start, I would say, stop resisting interdisciplinary inquiries. For wide-reaching issues such as smart city transitions, imaginative multidisciplinary collaboration is the only solution as far as we see. And unfortunately, we believe that we are still a bit far from there, especially because another problem is that most of the research that we are producing nowadays is very much technology focused, whereas the social sciences are left a little bit behind. And this is quite worrying to me, because it should be exactly the opposite. Now, recognizing these limitations, as I was saying before, together with the Development Bank of Latin America and UN Habitat, we have launched a global study whose objective is to explore how public sector organizations across the world are governing smart city transitions and the digital transformations that such initiatives are underpinning. And we invited hundreds of cities, and hundreds of cities have responded. So we are really pleased for that. But if you are interested in joining us by sharing your experience, please just let me know. We are still open, and we will be. You are very welcome to help us to capture this knowledge. Your knowledge can truly help produce strategic recommendations for local governments on how to best approach the governance of smart city initiatives. And we saw that from the initial data that we collected. And learning about your experience is, for us, of the utmost importance to achieve this objective, because we really need, what I was saying before, a collective effort. Thank you very much for your attention, and I truly hope that you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you.
Perfect.